Oh, yo, 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 yo. I hope my. Hold on a second. Baby, stay with me tonight. Oh, cut it off for YouTube. Shut the whole channel down, the whole episode down. What's up? What's up? What's up? What's up? I'm a Ghost. Welcome to the University of Ghosts. This first part of this lecture series episode is in conjunction with normal LOL. Anybody who's been with me, they know about normal LOL. If you're asking because you're new to this channel in particular regarding my credentials and documentation thereof, I've been talking about mental health for a long time. Maybe not as long as some others, but maybe longer than others. But I've been talking about mental health since about 2013, ever since my own struggles and battles with psychosis. You can go to Normal LOL, the podcast series, if you want to learn more about that, as this is not what this lecture series is all about. All my background, all my information is on there. Normal LOL, it's on Blueberry, it's on Apple, iTunes, and I think it's on a few other podcast platforms. There's over 100 episodes. And also check out other playlists on my YouTube channel. In particular, a lot of things regarding um, our nature as it pertains to melanated people, right? So yeah, this is in conjunction with normal LOL. Mental illness is not real. It's not real for black people. Maybe. Um, it might be a little misleading as far as this title is concerned, or maybe you might think I'm trolling, but it's not what I'm doing. It's a critical question. It's very important, especially when you're talking about decolonization, decolonizing words and labels, decolonizing other cultural perspectives on how we exist, decolonizing not only language but health practices, decolonizing educational practices, decolonizing sexual identities, decolonizing companionship practices, uh, decolonizing our views regarding spirituality or religion. Um, it's so much. It's so much out there, so many variables. So I have an answer to that question. I'm not gonna give it to you yet, though. As I've been studying for so long, I have a perspective on whether or not mental illness is real for Black people. But I'm going to encourage you to listen and to study because that's what this is about. It's about studying. I've studied a lot, so now you get an opportunity to study right along with me and to see how it is that I study these things. And ultimately, just to be clear, it's not about my perspective at all, as my perspective is subjective, relative to my own personal studies and experiences. And there's always another side of the coin, another side of the story. So ultimately, it's for you to come up with your own narrative because that's what I believe in. I believe in controlling the narrative, controlling your own narrative. So we're gonna get started in a second. Oh, okay, I see my levels. Check, 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 check. You hear me now? Hear me good? I think this is loud enough. You let me know if it's not loud enough. Just put it in the chat or send me an email, elricoramon@hotmail.com. Don't judge me. Yes, still gonna have Hotmail. um, you can also just jump in my DMs on IG, El Rico Ramon Worlds, and I post a lot of stuff. They're more mini short videos regarding um, mental health, mental illness history. But that's what I like to look. I like to look at the facts. I like to look at or the half truths, however you want to put it. I'm infatuated with ancient and indigenous cultures and their perspectives on mental health because that's my route. That's my journey, right? So without further ado, as I dive into this, I wanna dedicate this series. to Malidoma. Malidoma Some, an individual who was an instrumental part of my journey in the beginning phases of me taking control of the narrative. He's one of a number of people I came across regarding education, regarding the ability to take hold of something, to take hold of a perspective and perspectives that have been given to so many of us, that were given to me, and to twist it and mold it and put my own, assign my own value to it. Um, it meant so much to me to come across this brother, and unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to interview him. I wanted to interview him for so long. I kept going back and forth with his folks regarding getting him on my podcast, and in 2021, he made the transition, and arguably the it was fortunate he made the transition because he's another helper in that realm. He's still a helper here, as he left behind an amazing catalog and history. So I dedicate this series to him. I dedicate this episode to the brother Panic. Passed away in early November, I think it was. Excuse me, early October. And he too left behind an amazing legacy and catalog. So shout out to brother Panic also. So with that being said, I'll give you a second. Grab a piece of paper and a pencil. You might want to write this stuff down, or you might just want to listen to me just ramble. But I'm gonna go ahead and drink some of my seed and nut milk, and I'll be with you in a moment. Okay. Do ASMR. Y'all want to hear the sound effects? Making my milk. Don't ask me for my recipe, 'cause I ain't telling you. Nope, nope, nope. But if you happen to be in a city that I'm in, where whenever I'm traveling, as I am a solo nomad, hit me up. I might make one for you. This one is um, almonds, hazelnuts, and oat milk with cinnamon, nutmeg, and something else. Maple syrup, ginger. I feel like I'm missing something else. No, that's the main ingredient. Spring water. Don't be using nasty water, man. Use spring water. Mm. Let's get started. Let's get started. Let me grab my phone. So again, this is a layering. This is not the only episode that contributes or that is a deciding factor on whether or not mental illness is real for Black people. This is one episode out of however many. I'm not gonna say how many I'm gonna do because that don't never work. Um, just more information I want to leave behind for the people, for the people, right? I don't know how long this is gonna be, so bear with me. I wanted to I wanted to really put a focus and a spotlight on the beginnings regarding Malidoma Some, which was the narrative was the shamanic view of mental illness. And I've studied so many different perspectives regarding um, melanated culture. And just a sidebar, when I say black, because I want to be clear on that, because it's a word I don't like. I dislike, strongly dislike the word black. as we are so non-monolithic and from so many different areas of this globe, this universe. So when I say black, I'm talking about melanated people. When I say melanated people, I'm talking about indigenous Americans. I'm talking about indigenous African people, um, people that are came from Africa regarding the Atlantic slave trade, or from any other variables, any other transit routes. However you got here is how you got here, as we did not all get here the same way. And we've been lied to a lot. Our identity has been, switched up so many times and reversed and flip it and reversed it. Missy Elliott. You know what I'm saying? Like there's just so much that makes us who we are. So yeah, when I'm talking about melanated peoples, I'm talking about us as a collective, however you identify with that. And keeping in mind we are non-monolithic. So there just is no one size fits all when it comes to the melanated collective. So let's also keep that in mind as far as all fairness is concerned. But taking it back to the shamanic view of mental illness, as I've covered a lot regarding various indigenous African tribes and their perspectives on mental illness, we're going to talk about, in this particular episode, we're going to talk about Ghana for a second, right? Stay with me, indigenous, melanated indigenous people. Stay with me. One of the reasons why I want to talk about that is I'm going to cover also Indonesia and Pakistan regarding the shamanic view of mental illness, as it is different in opposition as it relates to the Western um, psych- psychiatric perspectives of mental illness from a modern point of view. Maybe not in fullness, but in large. For those of us who do consider ourselves indigenous Americans to have been here before the Atlantic slave trade, or those of us who think that it all starts with the Americas, whatever the case may be, um, you'll notice that I've spoken a lot. I've covered a lot regarding African perspectives of mental health. Two reasons. One is because when you see the narrative of how various indigenous tribes in Africa or the Americas, how they view mental health and the therapies and the remedies and plant medicines and spiritual um, divine principles of nature or gods being involved in the good and the bad aspects of mental health, it's all the same. It's all the same. So when I'm talking about something that relates to Ghana or Nigeria or Kenya or Colombia or Brazil, Mexico, the northern hemisphere of the Americas, keep in mind they all do the same thing to a degree. There's just different names, different titles regarding the physicians, different labels for the altered state or the mood disorder, you know, in that moment, different names for the plant medicines in that region. So don't get too discouraged or, thrown off by me talking about African indigenous perspectives and principles. Like it's all the same, and I will cover regarding the Americas. But I'm going to say one thing though, also regarding the northern hemisphere of the Americas. It's not a lot. It is very challenging to come across um, indigenous American practices regarding ancient mental health. And it's even more difficult to come across melanated individuals that can have a conversation about ancient indigenous practices as it pertains to the Americas. Why is that? I don't quite know. You know, there's a I have I'll get to that because I don't want to get too far off of what I want to talk about. But yeah, it's kind of challenging. So, for example, if we're talking about um, the southeastern portion of North America, as it pertains to Choctaw, Cherokee, Seminoles, Muskogee, um, Creek, Washita. I know I'm missing some. So many, so many. The mound builders. No, there's no documentation, none regarding mental health. Now, is that me implying that there's nothing that connects us to that, to those tribes, to the mound builders, to this region? That is not what I'm saying. I'm not implying that. Gotta go somewhere else for all that dialogue or that debate. What all I'm saying is that when it comes to ancient indigenous practices as it pertains to indigenous melanated Americans, as it pertains to the Southeast Corridor, I don't know where it's at, but you might know where it's at. So don't come at me taking shots. You got the information, send it to me. And in addition to you sending it to me, send me people that I can talk to and interview about this stuff because it's challenging to find um, these individuals. All right. So now we proceed forward. Shamanic view of mental illness as it pertains to Ghana. This is coming out of ResearchGate, and it's gonna be kind of lengthy, but we're gonna kind of break it up in pieces. All right. So, like I said, bear with me here. Let me turn my phone this way, and we will start. I'm gonna start with the introduction, but I want to also say where it's coming out of, as I like to give my receipts. The Shaman and Schizophrenia Revisited. This is coming out of ResearchGate, which is a very renowned um, research study site, as they have a lot of stuff on there. They a lot of information. It's one of my favorite sites I go to when I want to look up certain bits of information, among others. But ResearchGate is the site. Again, it's called The Shaman and Schizophrenia Revisited. The individual that's part of this, I'm going to butcher her name, but I'm going to say it anyways. Lerman Zakoto Dulan. Lerman Zakoto Dulan. That's three names. It's three individuals, by the way. So I should have said that. Vivian Afi Dzokoto, Virginia Commonwealth University. John Doolin, Utah Valley University. T.M. Lerman, Stanford University. So they all three of those individuals play a role in this particular study. Um, so I'm gonna read this. I'm gonna take a drink first. Hold on. This paper presents evidence that some, but not all, religious experts in a particular faith may have a schizophrenia like psychotic process which is managed or mitigated by their religious practice, and that they are able to function effectively and are not identified by their community as ill. We concluded careful phenomenological interviews in conjunction with a novel probe with Okonfu, priests of the traditional religion of Ghana, in Ghana rather, who speak with their gods. Okay, they would go a little further. Some reported voices which were auditory and more negative. Some seemed to describe trance like states, sometimes associated with trauma and violence. Some seemed to be described sleep related events, and some seemed to be interpreting ordinary inner speech. Mhm. These differences in description were supported by the way participants responded to an auditory clip made to simulate the voice hearing experiences of psychosis and which had been translated into the local language. Okay, let's move a little forward. Abstract. This paper presents evidence that some, but not all, reading the same thing again. Hold on, going further. Okay, introduction. One of the trickiest challenges in anthropology is how to interpret the relationship between cultural models of experience and what people experience phenomenologically and what people experience phenomenologically. So, whew, that's a strong word there. Anthropologists rely largely on interviews in order to understand and to understand the subjective dimension of human life. We ask people what they feel, think, hear, see, remember, and so forth. We take for granted that cultural models shape subjectivity, but also that these cultural models do not determine subjectivity. hmm Pay attention to this part. I had read this already. For example, in the United States of the 1950s, the expectations that the good woman married a man who was the primary earner for the family carried with it many implicit and explicit models about sexuality, about bodies, about authority, and about social roles. These models shaped many lives and many subjective judgments, which generated both comfort and great pain. Excuse me. The explosive power of books like The Feminine Mystique, 1963, and The Second Sex, 1949, arose because they allowed women to name an anger they did not always realize that they felt, and aspirations that they did not always feel they could safely assert. Let's go a little further. Mm. Psychosis is the term we use for perceptions and thoughts which are radically askew from locally shared understandings of reality. Let me read that again. Psychosis is the term we use for perceptions and thoughts which are radically askew from locally shared understandings of reality. Radically askew. I think that's interesting. I guess it goes into, the complexity, I guess, at times when we're talking about cultural models, cultural perspectives, cultural history, tribal dialect language, tribal cultural reality, as it's been changed so many times. And when we're sitting here talking about melanated people, we're talking about so many changes, so many drastic, radical changes in reality. The irony sometimes for me is that you have these enormous, drastic, radical changes in reality, and then you assign words to it. You create a lexicon of words called DSMs, DSM 1 through 6, if I'm correct. DSM is the diagnosis. Di- um, Make sure I say that right. Diagnosis of scholastic medical practices of mental illness. I want to say that right. I want to make sure I get that right for you. Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. Way off on that. Again, DSM, Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, starts in about late 1930s, early 1940s. Group of white men, as usual, creating these words and labels, and creating these perspectives of psychosis, defining these words, and never what they never attribute, what they never put in the DSMs are the colonized radical changes. You don't see colonialism in the DSMs. Why not? Right? You don't see the pillaging of tribes in the Americas in the DSMs. You don't see the um, snatching of languages and changing languages to from a indigenous tongue to a European colonized tongue. You don't see that in the DSM. You don't see the taking of Africans from another land to the Americas and the DSMs. You don't see melanated people that were here that were turned into slaves and subjugated, castrated to a degree in the DSMs, right? You don't see those things. You don't see land taken away from melanated individuals. You don't see that a label for that in the DSMs, right? Like all these different things. You don't see the conditioning and indoctrination of Christianity from a colonized point of view, from a European point of view, thrown on to melanated people. You don't see that. No label for that. No word for that. Or definition in the DSM. So when we're talking about these radical changes in reality and calling it psychosis, but not really giving the full blown, the fullness of what it really means to be quote unquote ill, something's wrong with that. Mental illness is not real for black people. Maybe. Again, DSM was Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. Again, there's so many episodes, so many lectures to cover on that. So much you can go and listen to regarding my podcast. There's a lot. There's a lot. Let's keep on moving. Psychosis is the term we use for perceptions and thoughts which are radically askew from locally shared understandings of reality. It can be hard enough when an anthropologist is in her native social world to understand whether someone is psychotic or simply idiosyncratic. Let's look that up. Look that up. This is a abstract lecture series, as I love to do late at night. Idiosyncratic. Sidebar. One of the reasons why I wanted to um, start doing this is because I'm a night owl. I be awake playing chess. By the way, if anybody plays chess, hit me up. I love playing chess. I will play you, and I may win, I may not win. I'll be playing chess, watching stuff or whatever. And I'm like, why don't you just catalog? Take all your stuff, man. Take all your stuff, put it on YouTube. You got so much stuff out there. Let's put it on YouTube. Let's do some lives with some people. You know what I'm saying? Get involved. So that's what I want to do. I'm gonna do some videos, some live lectures on this. They'll probably all be late, so you ain't up late, you might not catch it, cause I be doing the most throughout the day. Um, I'm also gonna put these on another place regarding AI and stuff like that. I'll get into that in the later episodes, but I'm going to store this information in a number of different places just so that people always have access to it. And when it comes to virtual reality and stuff like that, people are going to need to have access to a number of things regarding altered states and mood disorders because that world is interesting and the transitioning from different worlds to different worlds, you best believe you'll need some assistance with that. But again, I'll get in that later. Idiosyncratic. That was the word, right? That was the word, right? Idiosyncratic. Yeah. Idiosyncratic means peculiar or individual. Let's go to Merriam-Webster. I want to look at it a few more times. A peculiarity, yeah, of constitution or temperament, an individualizing characteristic or quality, individual hypersensitiveness, characteristic, peculiarity, eccentric. Okay, I think we get the point, right? I think we get the point. So peculiarity. And going back to what we were reading, let's use it again in that same sentence. It can be hard enough when an anthropologist is in her native social world to understand whether someone is psychotic or simply different, simply peculiar. It becomes harder when that person is located within a very different set of cultural understandings. This complexity is at the heart of some of the deepest arguments about whether and how much cultural practices can change the experience of psychiatric illness, and in particular, whether and how much cultural practice can change the experience of our most troubling psychiatric illness, schizophrenia. All right, and yeah, let's go ahead and dive into a lot of what's being discussed here regarding the background of this particular study. Looking forward to this. I didn't say this was going to be short, so gonna get what you're gonna get. We're 30 minutes in already. One of the oldest questions in anthropology is whether our schizophrenia is their shamanism. I'm going to say that again. One of the oldest questions in anthropology is whether our schizophrenia is their shamanism. Whether someone diagnosed with schizophrenia in the modern West might become a shaman in some other society and so avoid the stigma and disability we associate with the condition today. The question emerged in the earliest days of the discipline when the discovery of cultural difference seemed to offer freedom from blinkered presumptions about what was natural and inevitable. In 1934, Ruth Benedict published an essay, Anthropology and the Abnormal. Ooh, I'll have to read that. 1934, Ruth Benedict, Anthropology and the Abnormal. That became a foundational statement for this new way of thinking. Normal, she argued, was a relative concept, not an absolute one. One of her most famous examples was madness. Remember, read. Again, this is coming out of Anthropology and the Abnormal, Ruth Benedict, 1934. It does not matter what kind of abnormality we choose for illustration. These which depict extreme instability or those which are more in the nature of character traits, like sadism or delusions of grandeur or of persecution, there are well described cultures in which these abnormals function at ease and with honor, and apparently without any danger or difficulty to society. I'm learning something new too. I didn't even know about Ruth Benedict. You see, there's been plenty of doctors, therapists, psychiatrists that have written about um, the opposition, I guess, of mental illness. For example, you have Thomas Saz, Thomas Szaz. His name's coming up in the what I'm about to read. He writes The Myth of Mental Illness. You have a number of others that have talked about the same thing. You have tons others, tons, hundreds on top of hundreds, maybe even thousands that have talked about how um, the DSMs and other viewpoints of modern Western psychiatry and medical practices is very inaccurate, as you cannot scientifically diagnose the mind from that perspective. And I agree. Mental illness is not real for Black people. Maybe, maybe. Let's go further. Can we read that one more time? It does not matter what kind of abnormality we choose for illustration. These which depict extreme instability or those which are more in the nature of character traits like sadism or delusions or grandeur or of persecution, there are well described cultures in which these abnormals function at ease and with honor, and apparently without any danger or difficulty to the society. 1934, Ruth Benedict, Anthropology and the Abnormals. I'm going to look more into that too. I'll post that on my IG, by the way, later. There were cultures, Benedict argued, where those who heard voices interpreted them as voices of spirit and others agreed. And that could change who the person who heard voices was able to become. In time, the claim became a war cry. Books by Lang, 1960, Michael or Michelle Foucault, 1960, Thomas Shaz or Zaz, 1961, and Thomas Sheff, 1966, insisted passionately, each in their own way, that psychiatry imposed meaningless standards of normalcy on artists and rebels who were simply unconventional, not actually ill. I'm gonna read that one more time. I'm gonna read that one more time because that, yeah, that complements exactly what I just expressed regarding the ability to control the narrative, the ability to write history and rewrite your history and rewrite a culture's history and hide stuff from them, hidden agendas. I can give you labels, I can give you definitions for things that I want to assign to you, and I can diagnose you based on those labels that I create and those definitions that I've created and totally be dismissive of all these other variables regarding your ailment, your issue, your altered state, your disorder. Mental illness is not real for black people. So here you have a perspective regarding artists and rebels. Sidebar regarding rebels. Harriet Washington, medical apartheid. Harriet Washington, medical apartheid, talked about how black people were diagnosed with a mental illness. Black people were diagnosed as mentally ill because they didn't want to be slaves. They didn't want to work for white people no more. I'm gonna look it up. I forgot what the mental illness is called. Drapetomania, right? Is that right? I know. I think there was more than a few. Drapetomania meaning. I gotta mess with the font on this phone, man. The meaning of drapetomania. The desire of slaves to run away, viewed as a mental illness. An overwhelming urge to run away from home, a bad situation, responsibility from home. Because the white man said this is home. So if you want to run away from what the white man gave you, something wrong with you. You a rebel. You're treasonous. You're not patriotic. You're not down for the cause. And that makes you mentally ill. Something wrong with that. Something very, very wrong with that. Mental illness is not real for black people. Maybe. We'll continue. I'm gonna read that again because that was powerful. That's powerful. Very good book, by the way, too. Regarding, I didn't read all of it. I don't want to stunt, but I did read some of it regarding Thomas Sass. Thomas Sass, the myth of mental illness. In time, the claim became a war cry. Books by Lang, Michelle Foucault, Thomas Shaz, and Thomas Sheff insisted passionately, each in their own way, that psychiatry imposed meaningless standards of normalcy on artists and rebels who were simply unconventional, not actually ill. In another world, these books suggested people diagnosed with schizophrenia would be holy men, shamans, and prophets, not treated as abnormal and as ill. There were those who protested. George Devereaux, the most vehement of these voices, said briefly, he said, briefly stated, my position is that the shaman is mentally deranged. Briefly stated, my position is that the shaman is mentally deranged. But he was arguing against a dominant position. The perspective was consonant with the psychoanalysis of the day. These were the years that psychoanalysis dominated psychiatry. You don't want to get me started on psychoanalysis. Oh, you don't want to get me started on psychoanalysis. You want to get me started? I'm going to get started in a minute. I'm going to take it there in a minute. In a minute, in a minute, in a minute. These were the years that psychoanalysis dominated psychiatry and to some extent anthropology in the United States. In the 1930s, Margaret Mead, Ruth Benedict, Edward Sapir, Gregory Bateson, Ralph Linton, who's another popular individual who was in strong opposition of the diagnoses of mental illnesses, and others ran in psychoanalytic circles. They were part of an interdisciplinary seminar at Columbia with psychoanalysts like Abram Gardner. From a psychoanalytic perspective, schizophrenia was a reaction to social experience, not an organic illness. Ooh, ooh, mm. From a from a excuse me, from a psychoanalytic perspective, schizophrenia was a reaction to social experience, not an organic illness. Even if one conceded some organic process, there were no absolute standards against which individuals could be declared ill. I'm gonna read that one more time. Even if one conceded some organic process, there were no absolute standards against which individuals could be declared ill. To be sure, in this period, schizophrenia was a capacious category, and many who would now be diagnosed with bipolar disorder, borderline personality disorder, or post-traumatic stress disorder were given the label. Let's look up a word right quick. Capacious. If I don't know a word, I can look it up. I am a wizard when it comes to word, as they call me Anansi, the master weaver of reality. We love words. We love dissecting words. I'm a Virgo, so you get it. Capacious, capacious, capacious. Don't judge me. I know you know I know you know what capacious means. Excuse me for being a little elementary. I think I've seen capacious before, but capacity. I should have known that. Capacious. I won't look it up anyways. Capacious is having a lot of room inside, roomy. Okay. Okay, so we got capacious. I'm gonna go back to how they used it though. To be sure, in this period, schizophrenia was a spacious category, a roomy category. And many who would now be diagnosed with bipolar disorder, borderline personality disorder, post traumatic stress disorder were given the label. Then American psychiatry changed in large part became because many of the sickest patients did not respond to psychoanalytic therapy and because of the availability of new pharmaceutical treatments. Psychoanalysis was replaced by a biomedical model which held that psychiatric illnesses were diseases like any others in medicine. Psychoanalysis was replaced by a biomedical model which held that psychiatric illnesses were diseases like any others in medicine. In the new biomedical approach, schizophrenia was represented as a disease of the brain. Indeed, a well known book on schizophrenia written by a leader in the new psychiatric science was entitled The Broken Brain. This book is by a guy named Andreessen. Andreessen, 1984. More narrowly defined in the new nosology. I think it's like catalog of books. We study in here. That's what we do over here. I don't remember what nosology means. I know you know. I know you know, but I don't know. So I'm gonna look it up for the other one person that might not know. Nosology means a branch of medical science dealing with the classification of diseases. Catalog, classification of diseases. A branch of medical science dealing with the classification of diseases. Got it. the DSM. Um, More narrowly defined in the new nosology, the disorder was diagnosed by a characteristic combination of thoughts, delusions, and perceptions, hallucinations. Okay, which seemed untethered to what was real and which had lasted for 6 months or more, and caused substantial impairment in everyday life. In this new biomedical model, the characteristic symptom of schizophrenia was voices or auditory hallucinations, which are often negative and difficult for the one who hears to handle. Okay. Sidebar. Sidebar. Let me do something. Let me turn this off so it quits going my phone keeps going off. What I was gonna say is lights, display and brightness off. I'm gonna take it there. Psychoanalysis. Psychoanalysis. You gotta watch The Century of the Self. You have to watch The Century of the Self. You don't even have to watch all 4 hours of it. I think it's three hours and some change. I implore you to just watch episode 1 and 2, maybe three, but 1 and 2 definitely. And it sets up the inception and beginning phases of psychoanalytics regarding Edward Bernays and Sigmund Freud. Also tied into that is public relations, also known as propaganda. You got to understand that in the early 1900s, as psychoanalytics starts in early 1900s, there was a number of things going on. You have the inception of what I call modern black magic used via the occults. I can go too deep into that. Media, the medium of media. You have that beginning in the early 1900s. Um, psychoanalytics beginning in early 1900s. Eugenics in the Americas is beginning in the early 1900s, as eugenics have gone on for a long time. It's probably an antiquitous thing. But you have all these things going on in the early 1900s leading up to the diagnostic of statistical manual disorders and stuff like that, mental illnesses. So when you start talking about rebels and you start talking about the ability to control the narrative and manipulate people and put people in boxes and stuff like that, that's right around where it's starting regarding modern Western psychiatry. All right. So check that out. I'm not gonna go too deep into that because I want to get back to this. The Century of the Self. It's on YouTube. It's free. I don't even know why it's free. It's crazy. It's bizarre to me that that is free because it's such a snitch. It's a snitch documentary in which they're just snitching on themselves. It's hidden in plain sight. It's all there for you. All you gotta do is take that and just line it up the middle, and that's an extra added layer onto the fallacy of what mental illness is all about from a modern Western perspective. So much being left out. So much being left out with something that they label as mental illness. Mental illness is not real for black people. Maybe. Anthropology played an important role in this shift. Work in Ghana and Nigeria, 1963, Leighton, had already established that a pattern of experience like schizophrenia was present outside of the West. I'm gonna drink some water. I'm sorry. It's the sugars from the maple syrup. Damn, it's getting hot up in here. I already know what's about to happen in about 10 minutes. I'll be taking a bathroom break. Had already established that a pattern of experience like schizophrenia was present outside of the West. Then in 1976, the anthropologist Jane Murphy published an essay in Science in the publication called Science. Make sure that's clear. Which set out to show that whether on the Arctic or the equator, human societies identified a pattern of behavior in which some people had deluded thoughts and distorted perceptions, and other people inferred that there was something wrong with their minds. She had spent 1954 to 1955 in a Yupik speaking village on the island in the Bering Sea, an icebound place where the nomadic people wore layers of fur and survived the winter by eating raw fish. They used the word nuth, nutkaviak. Nutkaviak. I might be butchering that. My apologies to the nomadic people of the Yupik village. Nutkaviak, which they translated as being crazy, to describe people who screamed as invisible beings or drank urine or believed that their husbands had been murdered by witchcraft. But nobody else agreed. I'm gonna read that sentence one more time. They used the word Nutkaviak, which they translated as being crazy, to describe people who screamed as invisible beings or drank urine or believed that or believed their husbands had been murdered by witchcraft, but nobody else agreed. In their villages, they had shamans who behaved oddly, falling on the floor, crawling like a dog, but people did not call them Nutkaviak. As one person told Murphy, again, this is Jane Murphy, who did the essay in the publication Science. As one person told Murphy, when the shaman is healing, for example, in the strange state in which he summons spirits, he is out of his mind, but he is not crazy. Murphy saw the same thing among the Egba Yoruba, with whom she lived for many months in 1961 and 1963. The Yoruba, a farming people who lived in tropical thatched huts where chickens pecked in the ochre earth, used the word where to describe. Where or where? Were? Might be were. 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 The Yoruba, a farming people who lived in tropical thatched hats where chickens pecked in the ochre earth, used the word were to describe. Hearing voices and trying to get other people to see their source through none could be seen. Laughing when there is nothing to laugh at, talking all the time, or not talking at all, asking oneself questions and answering them, picking up sticks and leaves for no purpose except to put them in a pile, throwing away food because it is thought to contain juju. We know we've heard juju before, right? Tearing off one's clothes, setting fires, defecating in public and then mushing around in the feces, taking up a weapon and suddenly hitting someone with it, breaking things in a state of being breaking things in a state of being stronger than normal, believing that an odor is continuously being emitted from one's body. In all these places, the mere fact of hearing voices was not sufficient to get tagged as being crazy. These were worlds in which some people talked with spirits, and spirits answered back. Nuthaviak, going back to the Yupik people. Did I say that right? The Yupik. Yupik, by the way, if you want to look up these tribes. Yupik. Yoruba, Yoruba. Yoruba. Very popular regarding African traditional spiritualities. Very popular branch of traditional African spirituality. Um, Nuthaviak and Were were used for people who seemed not to think and perceive in a way that the village considered to be normal. And what was abnormal in the same way everywhere. For that matter, Murphy saw the same pattern in places she had lived for shorter periods in Gambia, the Sudan, and in South Vietnam. Symptoms of mental illness, Murphy concluded, are manifestations of a type of affliction shared by virtually all mankind. In 1980, the American Psychiatric Association, I always have trouble saying that word, Association, released DSM-3 in nosology, which presented psychiatric illnesses as symptoms of medical disease. That's interesting. So what, they didn't present psychiatric illnesses as symptoms of medical disease in DSM one or two. Maybe those particular psychiatric illnesses. Crazy, crazy. Ain't that crazy? That's crazy. That's crazy. That's usually the irony in it all. The irony usually is that the people that are doing the diagnosing, I'm about to make a blanket statement and generalize something that I hate. I'm not going to do that. The irony is that a lot or some of these people regarding the inception of these particular doctrines, DSMs, what's called the Medical 203 before that. I'll do an episode on Medical 203 shortly. These individuals that are creating these terms, adding these definitions to it, they have a radically skewed perspective of reality, of other cultures' reality, of human reality as far as in its fullness. Like they're so outside of the norm that they're not normal. So you have other abnormal people telling people that they're abnormal. And it's like, wow, I wish you could not be the pot calling the kettle black and the kettle calling the pot. You know what I'm saying? Like it's bizarre, you know what I'm saying? That these individuals who assign these things, like, yeah, arguably they have mental illnesses too, you know. It's funny. It's a common theme in the mental health realm of things, you know. I've done countless facilitations for mental health groups and stuff like that, and one thing that I've heard a few times, not a lot, but a few times, is that um everybody has mental illness, whether they know it or not is a different story. Quotation, quotation. And it was funny because I was like, yeah, because at any given point in time, any one person could be observed as crazy, and it's subjective because from another perspective, that person is seen as, no, he's just different. He's just different. He's an artist. He's a rebel. You know, he's that he has a he has a rebellious ancestor, an ancestor who fights through him against the system of oppression, against the system of racism, against the system of colonialism, against the system of capitalism, against the system of Christianity and all these religions that maybe don't belong in a lot of people's worlds, whatever the case may be. But eh, he's not crazy. He's just different. He's just different. That can be kind of triggering sometimes. I want to tell you about my viewpoints on the bird that flew over the cuckoo nest. Um, Let me plug my computer in. Hold on a second. Oh, I don't want the episode to end. Jack Nicholson, The Bird That Flew Over the Cuckoo Nest. I think I'm saying that title right. I watch it like once every year, every 2 years. I watched it again the other day, as it is Thursday, the 11th of January. I think I watched it on the 8th or the 7th, and I was every time all I can say to myself is, "Wow, this is so remarkable, so fascinating." The director, the storyline, the acting, and also so triggering at the same damn time. I'm gonna talk about that on the next episode because I need you to know. I need you to know that. I need you to know that mental illness is not real for Black people. Maybe oh, we're an hour. In this new environment, it seemed foolish for anthropologists to raise the question of whether a practice like shamanism could mitigate schizophrenia, a condition now understood as a universal brain disease best treated by medication. Hmm. Instead, one found in the anthropological literature papers which demonstrated that a shamanic state was not, in fact, like schizophrenia at all. Psychiatric anthropology began to focus on the way biomedical illness was shaped by local cultural conceptions. For some decades, the field focused more on disorders like depression and post traumatic stress disorder, which seemed less obviously disease like, and where cultural influence could perhaps be more clearly understood. To be sure, even in those early years, there was important work on schizophrenia. For example, Estroff, 1981, and more work soon emerged. I'm not gonna read all these people's names. If you want to read that, you gotta look it up for yourself. I gave you the receipts. Gave you the receipts at the beginning of this episode. If you want to look up this particular study, ResearchGate, you can look up all the names and all that stuff. You want to get that information. Still, scholars mostly did not return to the old shamanism and schizophrenia concern. Where we at? This is long. I think we're gonna do a part two on this. This is long. This is long. This is long. It is time to take up the question of shamanism and schizophrenia, or rather, religious expertise and shamanism anew. In the last few decades, psychiatry has changed again. Many psychiatric scientists now understand psychosis, the more general term for disorders of thought and perception, to be more like a continuum than like a category, more like a trait distributed in the general population, like height, and less like a broken arm, a condition which is clearly not healthy. There is sharply increased recognition that many social features play a role in who develops schizophrenia. Poverty, immigration status, trauma, and other forms of social defeat. Even having a dark skin in a white society. Bow. Wow. Wow. You think? You think so? You think wearing a costume? You think wearing a costume on a regular that you didn't want to wear, that you didn't sign up to wear? You think that might be a problem? Using somebody else's language, you think that might be a problem? Not having your own land to practice your beliefs, to speak your native tongue, to practice your educational, physical, mental health, spiritual health practices. You think that might be a concern regarding schizophrenia? Got me thinking about how I was talking to somebody about how we, as melanated people, how we can just, whether melanated woman or melanated man, how we can just be going to the grocery store. As soon as we see a law enforcement, police cop behind us, heart just starts beating fast. Damn. I'm not even gonna tell you what I do. I be like, mm-mm. I got my own little tricks of the trade to get away from them, but I'm not gonna tell you that live. But yeah, the things that start going through your mind. Like, why is your heart beating fast? Because a cop is behind you. You know why. I know why. But why? 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 I hate that. I hate that feeling. Auditory or visual hallucination. You start hallucinating. Something is about to happen. Something could happen when I get into this car, when I step out this door, depending on what neighborhood or environment you live in. When I go into this store, yeah, I'm I'm gonna read that one more time. Poverty, immigrate. Wait, I'm reading before that. There is sharply increased recognition that many social features play a role in who develops schizophrenia. Poverty, immigration status, trauma, and other forms of social defeat, even having a dark skin in a white society, increase the risk that someone will develop schizophrenia. A finding in line with the social disparities, I see this word all the time, epidemiology, epidemiology in which poverty, stigma, and social defeat increase the risk of many diseases. Mhm. New non pharmacological treatments for people who hear distressing voices, a major symptom of schizophrenia, find that social practices can mitigate the destructive emotional content of what the voice says. The question of whether and if so, how culture might affect schizophreniform disorder is now an active question in psychiatric science. I am shocked. In this paper, we raise the possibility that some, but not all, religious experts have a schizophrenia like process which is managed and mitigated by religious practice so that the individuals are able to function effectively and not identified by others in the community as ill. We suggest that the practice of the faith and their training and apprenticeship may diminish the negative voices, so characteristics of schizophrenia, and enable the individual to develop reasonable relationships with other voices that come to be experienced as positive. We suspect that the faith practice does this by offering a framework to interpret voice hearing as intelligible within a religious framework and a practice to help someone to work with their voices. Our evidential base for this work comes from the study of the Okomfo community around Cape Coast, Ghana. Woo! I like that. We're gonna do part two. I'm gonna end this right here, as I prefer not for these lectures to be super long, cause I just don't want to be super long. We could go for hours. We could go for hours, but it's a lot of information, and I want you to really hold on to what's being talked about. So coming up, we're going to read about the cultural model, the world of the Akomfo. That's going to be very intriguing and exciting. So you're going to want to stick around for that. And yeah, it's a lot, man. This is good stuff. Some of the stuff I hadn't even read yet, so I learned some new stuff myself. So what was it? What was it? It was were. What was the other word? Were and cool. I forgot the word by the Yupik village. I want to get that other word. Nutaviak. Nutaviak as being crazy. That's good stuff, man. I might actually break just that little part just to make a clip of that because I think that's important. Anyways, there was something else I was about to say though in regards to what I just read. Hold on for a second. Let me go back to something. um, I was thinking about how it said the question of whether and if so, how culture might affect schizophrenia form disorder is now an active question in psychiatric science. My issue with that particular question is I don't believe they can do enough because of how much they've done. You know what I'm saying? Um, Whoever they are, you know what I'm saying? Those particular people, whether it's those particular white people or the boule or a subcategory of black people that uphold the system and support that, whatever the case may be, I don't know if they can do enough, you know. I'm gonna do an episode soon regarding a remedy, one of many remedies regarding um melanated people. Not all, because we're non-monolithic. and we all don't agree on the same thing, which is great. It's great. So some. I'm gonna do an episode regarding one remedy in particular I perceive as the best remedy among many great remedies. And that remedy is land stewardship, or what the people in charge of the system might call land ownership. When I read a question like that regarding, you know, the psychiatric system now looking into how living in a white world can be schizophrenic for many, my thing is, okay, you you're slowly turning a new leaf, or whatnot, and as you turn that leaf and you make decisions on how to um, reconcile with what your system has done to melanated people in the Americas in particular, are you gonna give them their land back? Because I don't believe there's nothing greater than land. Because when we start talking about all these different things that they named regarding environment, regarding poverty, regarding having black skin in a white skin world, regarding all these different perspectives and variables of how an altered state can find its way into a human being, or whatnot. We don't have this problem when we're able to separate and do things in our own world. Yes, I am a separatist when it comes to the legacy of melanated people, some melanated people. I do believe in segregation. I do believe that some melanated people, if they desire, should have their own space to do what they need to do, whether it's connect to their native tongue, reconnect and connect to their identity, connect to um, their indigenous educational practices, their indigenous spiritual practices, their indigenous mental, physical, emotional practices, begins on their own land, not on your land, not on another culture's land. I want to control my narrative. And the way you control your narrative is by being in your own space, a space that you hold, a space that you own, okay? Better word, a space that you facilitate and manage and take care of, that you steward over, right? It's your space. And can no one take it away from you? You ain't got to pay rent on somebody's space. You don't owe no banks. It's your space. So for these people, for these people regarding that question, the question of whether and if so, how culture might affect schizophrenia disorder is now an active question in the psychiatric science. Well, all y'all in the psychiatric science and world or whatever, while y'all are sitting there asking these questions, I want you to also ask, how can we get land back in melanated people's hands so they can not be schizophrenic and not be crazy and not be depressed and not be anxious, and so they can heal their ancestors, so they can have body trauma healing. Have that conversation in your circles also. Okay. That's gonna do it for this abstract lecture. It's 2:44 in the morning. Um, Mental illness is not real for black people. It's not. Maybe. Hope you enjoyed my Cash App. For everybody who does lectures, I'm a teacher. I am a teacher. I don't get paid no other way. So if you wanna throw me $1.11 or $2.22, because I know y'all love angel numbers. Cash App is $El Rico Ramon. Don't spell El Rico with an I. El Rico Ramon. ELRECO Ramon. Um, yeah, I could use it. I could I could use it to pay. Maybe I could use it to buy some more land. So I ain't looked at like I'm crazy. But yeah, social media, Instagram, El Rico Ramon Worlds. Don't forget, again, like I said, regarding my catalog, regarding my documentation, my what's the word I'm looking for? My I can't. It's late. I can't think of the word. But my receipts, based upon who I am, normal LOL, the podcast, Blueberry, Apple, and other podcast platforms. Normal LOL, the website, the blog, basically. You know, you have that. You just go through my channel on YouTube. You can, there's so much stuff. You can get lost in a whole little tunnel. All the stuff that I talk about. Between all that and whatever I post on IG, it's all there for you. It's all there for you, all right? So yeah, I will go ahead and conclude this, and I will see you on the next one. I know you're asking when's the next one. The next one, if I am to be consistent with this, the next one, as it is early Thursday morning at 2:45, a quarter to three. The next one I suspect will be Wednesday, late after 12:30, because I always watch Twilight Zone first here, where I'm at right now. The next one will be the 17th, late at night. 17th, all right? So if you're up, watch it. Feel free to chime in. If not, look for the abstract lecture to show up on your timeline. Don't forget to subscribe to the video so you know when the lectures are dropping, all right? Again, this is dedicated to Malidoma Somé. Thank you for all that you are, all that you contributed to the legacy of melanated people as it pertains to mental health, you know, regarding your journey, regarding the Dagara tribe and Burkina Faso. I appreciate you, brother. And peace, y'all.